Carbon X3. It's like, oh, great. Go, 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 go. And you're like, okay, you over there. What? That feels weird. I'll dial that back. So if you're familiar with HOKA, you're probably thinking about cushion and comfort. But recently, HOKA's put a lot of energy and effort into their road performance line, with the Carbon X3 as the culmination of all those efforts. Could this be the shoe that lets you associate HOKA and speed? Maybe even lets you PR on your next race? I think it might be. So just a quick disclaimer before we get deep into it. I do work for REI, but the views I'm sharing today are based on my Jesus.
Let me slow down.
Yeah, like a breaking down. I do work for REI, but the views I'm sharing today are all my own based on my experience in these shoes. So the HOKA Carbon X3s are coming in at 7.8 ounces per shoe, or just under a pound for the pair. There's 32 millimeters of stack height in the heel and about 27 millimeters of stack height in the toe area, giving you 5 millimeters of drop. So my experience with HOKA was always trail first. I fell in love with the brand because I realized that they were designed to run downhill fast and keep your feet comfortable. And every time I look at a pair of HOKAs and see that meta rocker kind of shape, I think about like, oh, I can run downhill and the running will be fun. As I think more about speed and trying to train, I start to think about the offering that first piqued my interest, which was the carbon entry from HOKA, the X Carbon shoe. This is the X Carbon 3. This is the latest iteration of that. So this is the first carbon-plated HOKA shoe that I've been able to try. And so far, it kind of matched a little bit of what I thought, but it surprised me in a few ways too. So as far as updates go from the Carbon X2 to the Carbon X3, the big one that a lot of people have noticed, myself included, is the upper. So you do get this sock-like upper. What a sock-like upper, especially with an engineered mesh, kind of gives you a lot of times is a little bit of that stretch there. When your foot's swollen, it really allows you to kind of absorb some of that extra volume in there. You'll also notice that if you just look at the shoe just like that, it doesn't feel like a super low volume shoe. It actually does accommodate for a lot more volume than some speed shoes. Lots of speed shoes, in my experience, have been like almost designed for lower volume feet, or just like it's supposed to feel that way. This is supposed to feel comfortable, and it actually does. As far as the upper goes, like if you're not a person that's like, I need to dial in very specifically the lace system, and you're just kind of worried about the volume usually or the fit of the upper, then this does a really good job of capturing both of those two needs. But it's pretty sleek looking. It's got that perforation kind of that you'd expect from some of those breathable areas. It only has it in some key areas, which is interesting, like half the toe box or like this part of your foot. There's some really interesting parts of the upper, like if you kind of run your hands over the HOKA overlay, it's like really thick, which I think is really interesting for such a lightweight shoe. Like some of the design features on there seem unnecessarily heavy, but they do look cool. And you know, if you're a tactile person, like the mesh is engineered, and so it's a little bit stretchy, so it's kind of fun to play with that and feel that your foot can do a lot of different things, especially with just one piece. And then you have the lacing options here that again just run through that one piece. You have the reinforced portions on the eyelets, which is kind of nice. And you actually have a lot of different eyelets, which is interesting. Because it's just one piece, it doesn't help you dial in the fit a ton. You can certainly, you know, tighten it down, and it tightens down that middle portion of it, but there's no option to do like a runner's loop because it doesn't move anywhere, right? So that's kind of interesting. The heel is coming up a little bit higher, but it's not as high as some of the other models that you might be noticing from the HOKA line. If you feel the heel cup, there's not a lot of structure there, which is kind of nice. So overall, the upper, I think honestly the most structure is the overlay for the HOKA, which is again, kind of strange. HOKA calls out the asymmetrical colorway for this shoe so that you can stand out at any starting line. And for sure you would stand out with one of these shoes on, like pretty bold call outs. So another significant update comes in the white part of the midsole of the shoe. So you can see here that it's called out the ProFly X. And the ProFly X really gives what HOKA calls intelligent cushioning, which is kind of strange. It's like, does it have Bluetooth? Really what that allows for is like that really good compromise between cushioning and energy response. And you'll notice it like if you're a HOKA fan and you've squeezed lots of HOKA midsoles, you know that's kind of like a little bit less dense than some other midsoles. This one kind of feels on par with what you would think like most, you know, shoe manufacturers have in that way. It's still HOKA, so certainly there's lots of tech that goes into it, but it's going to give you that cushioning feeling and still that energy response. But really the way you get a lot more of that response is by this green portion portion right here, and that's going to be the rubberized EVA. So while this is more of like a traditional EVA, although the density is a little bit stiffer than you'd expect from some HOKAs, certainly it feels a little bit more dense. The rubberized portion really gives you kind of that bounce back. And then the namesake for the shoe is the carbon. You can see a little bit, there's that like those call outs there on the middle part of the shoe, but basically it's sandwiched in between these two layers. And the carbon is really what's going to give you that really responsive ride and that kind of energy return there. So if you look at the outsole of the shoe, again, it's kind of interesting because it's all one color, and sometimes you'll notice in outsoles, like you'll have these rubberized portions that are kind of meant for higher wear areas, but the whole part of the shoe is actually rubberized. So you are going to get a little bit more of that durability than some people might be expecting, but the shoe is not really meant to be like, you know, your long distance shoe, right? HOKA does bill it as kind of like an endurance racer. Typically, I don't think a lot of people would be using these for longer distances, but it is a shoe that you can actually train in, especially for some of your speed days. And if you decide that you want to race in a shoe that's like a really lightweight shoe, still comfortable on the upper and still gives you some of the cushioning, it might be a good option for you as well. So my first experience in the Carbon X3 was one that's kind of similar to a lot of experiences like initially, right? I like when I get a new pair of shoes to just put the shoe on. I don't do a ton of research beforehand. I know a solid amount about it probably, but I just want to see how I feel. I don't really have any goals that first run, but I put it on and I knew it was supposed to be kind of a fast shoe, and I felt kind of fast, and it was kind of fun to go fast. So I tried hard, and certainly it felt like the shoe was helping me try hard. And it's one of those things where, like, you know, you hear really top line athletes talk about, like, you know, watches are great as tools to help you really stay in tune with your body. I'm not there yet. So like sometimes I think like, I don't know how fast I'm running. And then you look at your watch, you're like, oh, good job. You know? So that was kind of my experience with this shoe. And it's probably because I can feel that energy response from that carbon in there. I did feel for sure like it was firm underfoot, which is to be expected, but it didn't really feel like, oh, this doesn't feel like a HOKA experience. I still got a little bit of that cushion and I got the energy return in a more unique way. So it was a pretty fun first experience, you know, the first time I laced up the shoes. You know, in comparison to other speed shoes, I think the interesting thing about the Carbon X3 is that it still feels like a HOKA. And for me, HOKA is all about like the geometry of the shoe and, you know, going heel to toe, which is kind of interesting because most of the time when I run, I land on my forefoot. So when you go heel to toe, which is something that I try to do in every HOKA shoe because it's just fun to use the shoe the way it was designed. And this feels like if you're used to running in HOKAs, you still get a little bit of that experience. And to be honest, again, 32 millimeters of stack height in the heel, it's pretty significant, especially for a speed shoe, especially for a lightweight speed shoe. So you are getting a little bit of that HOKA feel that you're used to. It just is a little bit denser. It's like somebody turned the knob for density and you're like, okay, I can tell where this came from, but this certainly is a slightly different vibe. So as I think about like some of my future goals, some of them actually include some road efforts in a way that previously I thought I'd never think about. So like I am looking towards maybe trying to run a marathon. As I think about training for those types of things, because I think I do want to try to train again, be more intentional. And this shoe feels like it's probably going to be more relevant as I start to think more about that. I'm probably going to have to be really intentional with some speed work, trying to be pushing pace a little bit more as the weeks go through. And this shoe I think is going to help me accomplish that. I am going to try to test out a few other speed shoes, which will be interesting to see how this one kind of matches up against it. So far, I have had maybe more fun in some other speed shoes, but I don't know that I would use them for maybe double-digit mileage. Again, right now my speed workout is like, let's try hard for a little bit. And as I try to think about trying hard for longer, this shoe might help me. I think the Carbon X3 is a great shoe for anybody that's looking to work on speed, kind of period. At least for me, I know that when Carbon first came out, it seemed like, oh, that's a technology that's for folks that are really fast and they want to get even faster. Like, I don't know, I don't really need Carbon. I don't even know if Carbon like makes sense for me, but trying some Carbon shoes on, it's really just like, it kind of makes sense for anybody that's looking to work on their speed. And that's one of the things I think HOKA does really well overall is that their footwear speaks to lots of different folks. The ProFly series of shoes, like their motto is time to fly. Like, that just sounds cool. Like, lots of folks would want to do that, right? So if you're one of those people that is serious about their training and maybe is like on the fence of like, should I try carbon, should I not? I think the Carbon X3 is actually a really good entryway to that. Like, it gives you a comfortable upper. It still gives you a little bit of that cushioning, a lot of it of that cushioning, 32 millimeters of stack height, but it gives you the energy return that you're looking from carbon that'll help you accomplish those specific goals. So if you're interested in working on speed, I think this is a great model for you. So I'd love to hear from you all. Have you been in a carbon shoe? Have you been in the Carbon X3? Do you think they stack up well? Do you have any recommendations for me as I look for training for my marathon, as I look to work on speed? Super weird. Leave a comment below. I'd love to read them. So my first experience in the, man, I can't remember the name of the shoe. Carbon X3.
Anyone who's seen your Cordeletta shoes would understand.
Yeah, I appreciate that.